What happens when you combine the best of the Adidas Predator, the Adidas X Ghosted, and the Adidas Copa Sense? Welcome back to boothype.com, and today we're going to be covering the mutant-like, if we could call it, the PredCopX. As you can imagine, the name comes from the words Predator, Copa, and X, and it has elements of all of those three boots. And the good news is that I think Adidas have been able to pull the three best elements from each of these three boots to form one super ultra boot. It's a shame it's only a limited edition boot, but it's also good that Adidas is aware of what works for each of the brands. In terms of looks, it is a confusing looking boot. I don't know whether I like it or not. It has from a visual perspective, from a colorway perspective, it follows the super spectral pack with the kind of bright pink look, which is meant for this year's Euros. We also have the Uniforia colors, which was meant for the original Uniforia pack from last year for the Euros. You can see the lime green, the orange, and the pink colorways here. It is a confusing looking boot, and I personally don't know whether I like the boot. Individually, the elements are all really good on a practical level, but from an aesthetic level, I'm not sure whether I'm really digging this boot, but I think it's pretty fascinating. So let's take a look at what makes this boot tick. Here we have the original Copa Sense 0.1 and the PredCopX. Now, you might see there might be a slight difference in size. That's because this is in my usual US 9.5, and this belongs to Jay, our regular writer, and he bought them one full size down from what I have. So you might see some slight differences in size, but in terms of its shape, it follows relatively the same shape. What I would say is that the Copa forms the base of the PredCopX in terms of the main shape and the main material on top of the boot as well. What you get is just like the Copa. Maybe it's easier to see on the Copa because there's no spikes on it. Somewhere along this area you will get true kangaroo leather, and then it moves up into this kind of synthetic leather material, which is at first quite hard to differentiate. What I would say, this is also the best fitting boot in the whole Adidas lineup. It fits true to size, so go for that. So it's got moderate width with toe room and a very snug heel area as well. So it fits extremely well. Go true to size. If you're whatever size you are, just go straight for it. You don't have to go half size down. And one of the things that I liked about it was that it was very snug all across. Now, one thing I didn't like about the Copa Sense was, if you take a look, it's got this kind of, maybe you can hear the squeaky sound, maybe you can't hear the sound, but it's got this very plasticky feel to the kind of heel pods that you have around the back, and that's one of the biggest complaints that people had. It didn't create too much blistering for me, but you know, it was relatively comfortable, but I would have liked something more luxurious, like a synthetic suede liner. The good news about the PredCopX is that Adidas has listened to the people, and as you can see, it is this kind of luxurious suede liner as well. So expect it to feel a lot more luxurious around the back. Instead of this plasticky feel. So expect, for some people who face blistering, expect less blistering. Now, what I've also noticed with the leather around here as well is that, you know, it was quite thick across all parts of the boot, especially with the with the kind of foam pods that appear throughout the boot. Now, what I've noticed with the PredCopX is that while they on paper look to be sharing the same upper, I found it to be just slightly softer out of the box for the top of the boot and for the entire boot's upper. And the reason why I think this is the case is because they seem to have reduced the amount of padding within the boot. It's still pretty padded. It's still got this dense foam padding across the boot, but it does feel slightly more stripped down, and that could be good on some levels because the padding is pretty thick, especially when you first wear it on feet. It is quite densely packed in your foot, so it feels very tight, and it takes about 5 to 10 minutes of some light jogging and some light passing for it to kind of soften up. So I feel like you won't have that much of that dense feeling across the inside of the boot. So expect that to feel a lot less padded, which is quite good because you have an extra layer of rubber spikes on the outside. So yeah, so expect to feel less of that dense padding in the case where some of that touch is going to be taken away from the spikes that you have on the outside. Speaking of spikes, what we have here right now is the Predator Freak 0.1, and that's where the PredCopX receives its spikes from. As you can see with the beautiful new Super Spectral Pack, Predator, the formation of the spikes, the demon skin spikes, are exactly the same. And one of the good things about the spikes for me is that it has improved from the last version of the Predator. I believe that's a 20.1. What we have is that the spikes are a lot thinner and they're a lot softer, but they're much more spread out across. So you kind of get gaps in between each spike. And what it does is that it allows the ball, and when you make the contact with the ball, it allows the ball to kind of sink in a lot deeper into the boot. So I think it's quite a good decision for Adidas to kind of strip down the padding on the inside. So you would have two layers that is available between the ball and the boot. So there's a bit of the leather padding, and then there's the spikes as well. So if you had all of that dense foam padding, it might be too much layers between your foot and the ball. You might not feel anything. I still expect this boot to be pretty padded, and you might not feel that much of the ball. But what it does with the spikes is that you would expect it to give you that a bit of curl and that touch, that kind of very sticky touch as well. For those who are very assured of their touch, you can hear that sound. It's very squeaky. For those of you guys who might be very assured of your touch, you might have to get used to how sticky and rubbery this, you can hear that, how rubbery this feels like, and you might have to get used to how you touch the ball and how you kind of control the ball. But once you get used to it, and if you're really good with manipulating the ball with your curlers and your free kicks, I think this is something that might interest you a lot. For those who like your classic Copa Mundial leather boot, maybe not so, but I think this is one of the best innovations and one of the coolest innovations that you get in football boots in recent years. And last but not least, what you have is the X Ghosted. Visually, it takes on the kind of 3 stripes on the lateral side of the boot, just like what you see over here. It's a beautiful touch on the design, but from a practical perspective, what you get is it's amazing, beautiful sole plate. What you have here, yeah, it is very much a very aggressive sole plate meant for FG, but surprisingly pretty good for AG as well, with its chevron and kind of bladed studs. They kind of upsized it in terms of its look and feel with this very glossy sole plate. Extremely beautiful, and they have the star of the show here, which is the Carbitex, well, essentially the carbon fiber insert on the forefoot. So that allows for this flexing motion. I can't push it down now because it's too stiff, but when you're playing with it, you can expect just this resistance. So when you flex, it tries to kind of flex back and flex straight up, and that creates that springing sensation that helps you feel front-footed and helps you feel like you could explode forwards when you sprint, right? It is You know, it is one of the best features of the X Ghosted, and one of the most beautiful sole plates that you can ever get on the market as well. Now, if you love your speed boots, this is the element of the boot which makes it feel very, very speedy and very, very fast on your feet. And yeah, and that's for me is the highlight of the X Ghosted element, and that makes the boot a very slightly confusing boot, which we'll discuss in the last bit of this video. And there you have it. We've kind of brought you across all the three solid base elements of the boot. Overall, it's a very confusing looking boot, but I think it's a boot that would perform very well once you kind of get past the kind of sensory overload of having all these new sensations on one boot, whether it's a snappy sole plate, whether it's all that grip, and whether it's that kind of dense foamy touch that you get on the upper. You know, it is gonna be quite, you know, the sensory overload, but I think that will be quite an interesting sensation once we kind of get this on feet. Right now we can't run our playtest because of the COVID situation in Singapore. We're not able to train in more than groups of 2, which makes it very tough for us to get on the pitch. But I think that's something that we're gonna be doing very soon. Once, you know, once we get it on our feet, I think I would have liked to have a thinner upper to accommodate the demon skin texturing across the spikes, across the upper. I still think that it is pretty dense, and once you have the spikes all across it, that might just mean that you don't get the kind of close touch on the ball that you usually would like. So I'm just assuming right now, and we'll get to it once we get the playtest done. But I have a big feeling that many of the old school classic Predator lovers would love this boot, because they've been clamoring for a leather boot with that kind of leathery touch, with all the spikes and all that grip. And this is essentially the grippiest football boot I think ever made in history. So I think those who should look up for the playtest and those who should look to buy it should be those classic Predator lovers. If you want to get it, we have links in our description below, so do buy it there. And if you enjoyed this video, let us know what you've liked in the comments below, and do drop us a like and subscribe. So from all of us, this is boothype.com, and we hope to see you on the pitch and on YouTube very, very soon.